Thanks, Geoff, for joining us today on the Inside Content podcast. Can you start off by talking me through what your current company, acTVe, does and your role there?
Sure. So active is, in essence, a managed channel services company. We own, operate, and manage channels both for ourselves and for clients. We really focus on channels that are fronted either by a globally recognized brand or a celebrity or well-known talent. Um, and so we really try to seek out those types of channels that in essence, like the bigger studios won't go after. Uh, for example, we do the Joel Osteen channel on behalf of Senders Media out of Dallas, and it's a great channel. It has some fantastic content that they've been producing for over a decade. They own their entire library, and we came in and act basically as a like network in a box for them. We go out and get all the carriage deals, schedule and program, do all the strategy, all the content preparation, basically everything soup to nuts that they would need to go from having an idea of doing a fast channel to actually executing on the fast channel.
Yeah, makes sense. And speaking of the sort of scheduling and programming, can you talk me through a bit about the process that you guys go through in terms of curating your fast channels and how you build out the programming?
Sure. So each channel really is unique to the channel's DNA. So, you know, some of the programming requires just much deeper curation. For example, we do a lot of the licensing and curation and scheduling for Documentary Plus, which is owned by XTR Studios. They have a fantastic brand for documentaries. So we program some docs that they own and have produced. And in addition to that, we try to go out and license from, the best distributors we can, um, films or series that kind of feel like their brand. Or in some cases that we think will just do really well on fast. And so each channel is really very different. You compare that to, let's say, going back to say like the Joel Osteen network, he's got an entire library that we don't necessarily need to go license on top of, but there are a lot of other clever scheduling strategies that we employ to help retain viewers based off of his library. So, for example, at Thanksgiving time, a lot of the content was geared much more towards family. At Christmas, it's geared much more towards music and Christmas content. Obviously there's flagship, holidays like Easter. And then there's things where we do like, top 10 best pieces of content over the years. So we build listicles and things like that so that it still feels fresh every time you watch the channel, even though we are in essence kind of pulling from the same, 2 or 3 thousand hours, which is still a substantial amount of content. Um, but we want to make sure that when you watch the channel, you are getting something fresh and new and exciting, and ideally you see some fun interstitials and bumpers with Joel or his wife Victoria that kind of let you know that it's cared about and that they are involved in the channel and that it does fit with the DNA of their brand. Um, so really isn't a one size fits all approach, but we kind of go through channel by channel and figure out what the best strategy is for each of them.
Yeah, makes sense. That's really interesting, especially with the sort of seasonal promotion stuff. I think that can be, extremely, helpful with
Yeah, and
fast.
honestly, there's something every month, like for summer, we have a surfer channel. Obviously, we
Yeah.
should be playing the endless summer and, pushing hard on the platforms and curating summer blocks. You know, so I think like every channel has some sort of like timeline of events that make sense for their channel.
Yeah. That's nice too, especially having, a handful of different channels and being able to kind of use each one like you just said, for the right purposes. So, jumping to monetization, are you guys doing inventory shares or revenue shares? Is there a preference you guys have there? Essentially, what I'm trying to get to the bottom is kind of how you're monetizing your channels.
So we are a bit of a mixed bag. 6 years ago or whatnot, when fast, or 7 years ago when we started launching channels, I guess it was 2018. Um, there was a lot more flexibility, I would say, between inventory versus revenue. Even with like Samsung you wanted an inventory share, there's like no questions asked. You can just take it. Um, flash forward to today, a lot of these companies have evolved their ad sales teams for the better. In places like Samsung and Amazon and some of the other Vizio, uh, I would argue because of their scale, can likely do a better job than a third party programmatic partner, depending on the partner. And a lot of their stacks probably have these partners built into them anyways. So we really go through like platform by platform and make that decision. We fill, I don't know, maybe 35% of the channels that we own and operate via inventory shares, and the rest, especially like the top tier platforms who don't want to give up that data or those inventory rights, they fill. But they've, like I said, over the years, they've gotten much better at it. I think we've got a ways to go. We will never see 100% fill, but if we could get close to 90% fill, I think that is a massive game changer for the industry, um, just for revenue driving. Just imagine we're leaving half the money on the table because we're just not filling ads. You would never see Fox not fill an ad, or you would never see, you know what I mean? Like that's a problem that definitely needs to be solved. And then we do a lot of like ancillary additional revenue pieces to the channels to try to drive, any sort of extra revenue we can. Some of those are like on-air sponsors or picture-in-picture ads or shoppable tech or anything we can um, to try to add to our bottom line.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, good point because we talk so often about CPMs and fast, but the fill rates is almost more crucial. So it's a upward battle to fight. But
I mean, I would take a lower CPM if we could fill 100% of the ads, because then
yeah,
I feel like then from there CPMs will rise.
yeah,
Um, but it's still a little bit wild west. All of the kinks are still being worked out. I think we've got to work out all of these ad kinks in the next 18 months, or none of us are going to have jobs. But, with players like Amazon and now Walmart and Vizio and some of these bigger companies coming in, they've got plans on how to fix that, and the tech is there. I think it's just going to be a matter of time before it all gets to where we need to be.
yeah, totally. Um, and I guess like with the growing competition in fast, I mean, you just talked about how even the evolution of Samsung and these big players in just a few years. How are you guys differentiating yourselves in the market? I know you talked a little bit about the content curation and you taking a unique approach to programming the channels and getting the partners directly involved in it. But can you kind of maybe give a few more examples of essentially how you're trying to get yourselves ahead against all the other thousands of channels that exist currently?
Sure. The simple answer here, which is, somewhat of a ridiculous answer, is find the best channels possible that can compete with, Disney channels or Sony channels or Warner Brothers or Paramount or, A&E, which has amazing channels. Um, so it's finding a way, we try to find a way that we know our channels can compete with the level of those big studio channels, because obviously we do not have big billion-dollar studio bankroll. Um, so I think it's being clever. Our kind of like short-term solution to that, which is our big strength as a company, because of our resources, is like I said earlier, we lean heavily into celebrity-fronted channels. I would argue we have more celebrity-based or talent-based channels, and on top of that, more brand-fronted channels than any other company in the ecosystem. And that's because 2 years ago we started pushing down this path. um, it just kind of became obvious once all the big players started, rushing into fast, and Sony launching 50 channels and A&E with who knows 25 plus channels, and you've got to find a way to compete with those in as clever of a way as possible, since we can't spend the big money. So it's a little bit of that, is like finding the niches or the channels that just don't exist, and great content that makes sense for fast and kind of fits the algorithm for success of fast. Um, because really what it comes down to at the end of the day is, will the platforms take your channel? And if you're the 19th true crime channel, it's going to be really tough. Um, but if you're a, David Letterman channel, that's a no-brainer. So it's all about, finding the diamonds in the rough, or convincing, these types of people to do channels.
Yeah. Well, you beat me to my next question was to ask about some successful partnerships and collaborations that you've done, and you've kind of spoken about them. But I'm curious, like, how do you identify these opportunities? Are you guys doing a lot of outreach and trying to tap into, somebody like Joel Osteen that has a library of content that's not being utilized in Fast? Is this something like you guys are constantly reaching out, or are you being approached? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so we do a lot of biz dev. We have a specific checklist or algorithm of what we know works for a channel. So we do weekly meetings where we talk about what we think would work, or what is missing, and then we shortlist what those channels might be. And in some cases, we do get some inbound or some referrals. Um, but we, it's Fast is so incestuous in a way. There's so much crossover between even like the resellers and the ad market to, multiple companies running one channel or whatnot. And so I've always looked at Fast as being more of like a co-opetition rather than like a straight competition or winners and losers. I think there's enough pie for everyone. And eventually we'll work out discoverability a little bit better on all these platforms. So there will be enough room to have 1,000 channels if platforms want it. And so then it really just becomes about finding the best channels and the best libraries and the best partners. And we partner with other companies on a lot of channels. We have channels that we co-own with other companies that are fast companies, because it just made sense because we brought, some of the pieces, they brought some of the pieces, and the sum of all parts make a great channel. And it allows us to mitigate our risk on both ends, cost wise, or, share resources, so that we can do them for as inexpensive as possible, in order to increase, our revenue potential. Um, so I don't know. I think you've got to work with everyone else that's in the industry and really find a way that it's mutually beneficial, for everyone. And that just allows us to leverage our resources appropriately as well.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so I guess the short answer is, it is a bit of a co-opetition, and I think together we all win rather than like, if I win, you have to lose kind of mentality.
Co-opetition. I like that. I really like that word. It's a good one. Um, and yeah, I mean, you've touched on it in a lot of the answers that you've already, spoken on, but like, what is the future of fast to you? If you kind of look at 2025, like in the next year or so, like, do you think it's going to be, a big focus on getting more data, or improving the advertising, or is it going to be more of the content? Like, what would you kind of say is like what you think the future of fast means and something that you at Active TV will be focused on?
Well, uh, I think we need to fix a bit of a messaging problem in Fast. And one of my favorite people in Fast is a guy named Alan Woke from TV Rev, who created the term Fast. Um, and at the time, we needed something to kind of identify these linear streams and whatnot. I think since then, the industry has evolved and grown so much, um, and it's become very confusing to advertisers, I think, because you've got OTT, you've got CTV, you've got fast, you've got AVOD. Now there's all these other new terms like, hybrid AVOD and PVOD and FVOD and all of these acronyms that sound great and all have some sort of purpose. But what we've learned from going out to advertisers and agencies and whatnot is not a lot of companies have a fast budget, but a lot of companies have a television budget or they've got a streaming budget. And so my big thing that I would like to see change, which I think is a good first step in this process, is everyone referring to fast instead now as just streaming television, because that's really what it is. And when you like look under the hood, yeah, Sure, it could be OTT or CTV or fast or whatever you want to call it, but the general consumer doesn't know what fast stands for, or CTV or OTT for that matter. And in order for the industry to solidify as like a fat being the fabric delivery and how it just feels as looking at these apps, we need to call it what it really is, which is just streaming television. It's just what we got over cable now is over streaming. The business model and the back end has changed, but really for the consumer, it's just television. Um, so I don't know. My big change that I'm trying to advocate for is that, and hopefully that can be the first step in pushing towards this process, which is step two, which is the bigger platforms or smaller platforms, whoever, just exposing more data. Because if it was television, just like Nielsen, you would get all that data. And that data, I think, is very important for the channel operators to help make this succeed more because we need to know who's watching what at what time. That's how we make better schedules. And then if, most of these deals are on a rev share with a platform, that means we're both making more money. And so I think that's the next evolution, um, where it needs to go. Because also without this data, it's really difficult to sell sponsorship campaigns or product campaigns because they'll just go to Google or Facebook where they can get every single piece of data down to the minutia of what that customer is. Whereas like with Fast, a lot of platforms, it's like, here's minutes watched for the month, or here's paid impressions. And it's like, okay, well, I can somewhat quantify a CPM, but like, was this CPM at 4 a.m.? Was it a high CPM? Were they watching at 2 a.m.? Were they watching at 7 p.m.? How did all of this shake out? Is it male, female? Like, where in America is it? Is it like there's so much to be desired there that I understand is very valuable data for the platforms. And I'm not saying the platforms need to expose that data publicly, but I think if they were smart, they would work out deals with channel operators, put them all under NDAs and say, hey guys, like you're not allowed to share this data, but we're going to open it up to you so that you can at least do your jobs better. And then everybody wins. The content sellers win, the channel operators win, the platforms win. It would have a nice ripple effect throughout the industry. Um, and we could charge better, higher rates, and everybody wins more. It's like imagine, American Idol or CSI or something on Fox or CBS, and then like them not telling you the rating of that show. You'd be like, "What are you talking about? That's insanity." You know what I mean? Like that would never happen on Fox or CBS or NBC. There's just no way. So I think we
Mhm.
need to get to a place where that same sentiment exists in Fast.
Yeah, and I think it is heading that way because more and more people are seemingly putting their foot down and trying to get this data. So hopefully that's something we'll see this year. Um,
Yeah, a
so I
little
guess
compromise. A little
yeah,
compromise in there would be great.
yeah,
Like I said, everybody would win,
yeah,
which would be the
totally.
best part about it, you know?
And also, yeah, going back to your point on like, the consumer doesn't even know that they're watching Fast or CTV or any of that stuff. It'll be interesting to see how like Amazon their business, shakes out because they're shutting down the Freevee, moving to Prime Video, and integrating the fast channels even more into their regular interface. So it'll be interesting to see how players will continue to do that sort of stuff, and I guess continue to consolidate as we've then went in the past and fragmented this market so much. So
Yeah, I mean, I think Amazon has taken a smart approach. It's the we will take everything approach. You want to buy a movie? Great. You want to watch a channel? Great. You want to download Paramount Plus app? Great. We'll do that for you too. And
yeah,
they're taking a small slice of every single one of those
yeah.
businesses. It's like the old iTunes way. I'm
Mhm.
actually quite surprised that Apple didn't jump on this earlier. I mean, that's what they did for music. Shocked they didn't kind of like see that writing on the wall for AVOD. They kind of stuck with the TVOD, and guys, that kind of dies a slow death like the DVD has. Uh, they should have been
Yeah,
the ultimate bundle like Amazon is. You get anything you want on Amazon, basically.
yeah. It's the one-stop shop. So
Yeah, smart.
yeah. All right. Well, let's shift to free live sports. This is your latest venture. I'm curious to hear about kind of how this came to be and what you guys, from ideation to the actual launch? Like, can you talk me through a bit about this process?
Sure. So Free Life Sports was a company that was formerly called Sports Tribal UK, that was based in London. Um, I was approached by a couple other partners that we have in the industry, Kathy Rassenberger and the guys from OTT Studio, James and Ryan, and they had come up with a plan where they wanted to buy um, Sports Tribal with a growth strategy, and there was an opportunity, and so they brought active in on that, and collectively we bought it in June. We've revamped the company. We've now kind of focused our efforts in the US, where we feel that there's just a much broader sports audience than in Europe. Um, still alive in Europe as well, which is a nice stepping stone, but we've really become much more focused on the US. We initially had about 55, 60 channels. We've now gone and signed about double that amount. We're up to about 135 channels. About 100 of those have launched and are live on the platform today. And we've just been slowly rolling out all the apps across places like iOS and Vizio and Fire TV and Roku and soon to be Samsung and LG and everywhere else. Um, and the goal is to create, the ultimate hub for all things sports content, whether it's the bigger sports or the smaller sports. We don't have anything like ESPN yet, since that's considered traditional cable. But in essence, we're looking to build like a free Fubo that doesn't require a subscription and still kind of gets you every possible sport out there, as well as the sport, the athlete influencers. Um, and so far so good. um, you know, a lot of the channel partners were nice enough to kind of go on this journey with us. As a new platform, definitely is going to take some time to find our sea legs and to acquire customers and let people know that it exists. And we've got some clever plans starting in January to do that. But we've spent the past like 4 to 5 months, in essence, like cleaning up the company from the previous regime, hiring more staff, finding better content. We launched AVOD, which they didn't have before. We launched a traditional guide, which wasn't in existence before. And slowly but surely just trying to make it the most attractive sports platform out there. In January, we're going out to do a raise, and we've been talking to some companies already that are interested. But I think from here, we've kind of set a nice base for the business, and now we're looking to push back into growth.
Yeah, makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, and we'll have some exclusive channels. We have our own FLS Super channel, which we're also distributing out to other platforms. But much like the other platforms, we're going to have a suite of O&O, owned and operated channels that you'll only see on Free Live Sports. Some of them you'll see other places, and then we've been cutting deals with leagues and other channel operators to also be their managed channel services, in addition to everything else.
Oh, cool. So you
Yeah.
mentioned that you've already grown it from the 50 or so channels up to 100. Are you planning to continue to grow it, or are you kind of happy with this amount and you're going to focus on, making sure that these channels perform well? How do you balance that?
So it's a little bit of both. Um, I think on the growth part, having a marketing executive on board and having like a very clear strategy for 2025, um, should be helpful for everyone. I think we needed to get a certain collateral of channels on the platform just for discoverability and to make it appealing for just anyone to come and hopefully, hey, you came for the Nitro Circus channel, but then you discovered Mav TV. Or like, oh, you didn't know PFL even existed. Well, we've got a channel for that. Or, maybe you're a big golf fan and you wanted to get the Golf News Network, but you didn't know where to get it. Like, we've got that for you. Um, so we really just wanted to make sure there was enough on the platform that it would keep people happy more than just finding a singular channel. Um, so I think we've gotten to that point. Now we're really trying to refine the channels that we take on and take on just like as big of channels as we can, all the major sports leagues, um, and just make it as quality as possible. Um, and then we're signing some deals with some talent that are well-known athletes in specific, genres of sports that will also have their own channels. Um, and same with a few leagues. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a process that has to be done on parallel tracks. Um, but but yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal is to make all the channel operators money, so that they want to stay on the platform and to get as many eyeballs as we can, and and slowly, kind of level up little by little, um, and just bring as much awareness. I mean, we're going to lean heavily into TikTok this year, which I would say not a lot of the other platforms are doing, as well as just like more video strategy and deeper marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I'd imagine the typical sports, the football, basketball, the pro sports leagues are obviously big hits. But then, how do you kind of identify and balance those between like the niche offerings? Because now there's like a fast sports channel for everything. I just saw like a cornhole league channel, and there's just
We've
about
got that
every.
one.
Yeah, okay, you've got it. You can watch Corn League on Free Live Sports. But how do you kind of maintain the balance between those bigger sports and then those niche offerings as well that people might, they might not even know that they want to watch it, but then they found it and then they want to keep watching on your platform.
So it's funny. It's you know, Kevin Smith, for example, always talks about like his like 1,000 fan rule. That if you've got 1,000 hardcore fans as a filmmaker or a celebrity, even like you can that's a business. They'll buy your merch, they'll watch your content, they'll come back as long as they're a hardcore fan and you please them. They'll keep returning. So we're kind of basing that strategy a little bit upon these more niche sports. And for example, we have an equestrian channel that does like pretty well because there's not a lot of them, and that's a very like niche sport that you cannot go to Peacock or any other place to find that channel. So I think part of it is super serving those types of customers, and then over time, trying to get more and more prestigious rights, live rights, mostly as we go on. So, we're never going to be able to compete with Amazon or Netflix getting a Christmas NFL game or something. They're paying hundreds of millions of dollars. Um, but we'll find other ways to super serve that NFL fan that isn't necessarily by watching the game. In some cases, it might be like Origin Sports, where you're watching legacy games that are the best games that you've ever seen, and it's that way. Or, maybe it's these like analysts that are incredibly popular pieces of talent that kind of pulled back the curtain behind what's really happening with these sports and gives you a different perspective on the business angle or on the fantasy football angle or, whatever it might be, big podcasters, um, in order to kind of like get that kind of like wraparound fringe element of the NFL where it's still talking about the NFL and everything that's going on in the NFL, but we're just not watching a live Monday night football game. Um, we hope to over time, elevate, and as we earn more revenue and invest more in the company and all that, find more prestigious live sports. Um, but I think that's more like phase two or phase three as the company grows. Um, but but yeah, I mean, I think if this should be the ultimate, if you're a fan of any type of sport, ideally this is where you go. Whether you want to watch a scripted sports movie, or you want to watch a live game, or you want to watch 24 hours of cornhole, like you know, we'll present that option for you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I was at a conference recently and they were talking about how younger audiences are consuming sports content differently and that they much prefer highlights over full games. So
Yeah.
how do you, is that something that you've uncovered as well, and that is that something that impacts your guys' strategy? I know you mentioned that you have AVOD content and that you're going to do a big push out on TikTok. So can you kind of talk me through the sort of highlights versus full games and how that, overall affects your guys' strategy?
Yeah, I mean, we're employing a tech in January that is geared towards almost exactly that. Um, Highlights and bite-sized content that you can watch, ideally from your phone pretty easily. Um, you don't necessarily have to sit around for 3 or 4 hours to get what you want out of it. But yeah, I mean, and that kind of like ties into our social media strategy, which is like that's another way we're gonna get awareness and attract people to the platform is through these. And I believe that the highlight clips and everything are great, but also attaching some talent that relays that information, whether they're a former pro or big name podcaster or whatever it might be, uh, is a really fun way to skin that content, so people want to keep coming back. And so that, when the sensational stories or the cool highlights happen, they get a bit of a taste of it on social, and then they can see the longer, slightly longer, maybe even in some cases, or just a curated feed of it on the platform in addition to it. Um, but yeah, we look at it as like more of like a full ecosystem that needs to thrive rather than just like a singular television ecosystem.
Mhm. And you mentioned being live and focused in the US. Are you guys live elsewhere for the platform?
Yeah, so we're live in about 70 countries now, I want to say. Um, but yeah, you can find us pretty much everywhere. We pushed because the company was originally from the UK. We had a lot of European rights, from partners and a lot of global rights. So, thanks to geotagging, depending on the country you're in, you'll find, at least 75 channels. Um, and in some countries, all of the channels. And some of these partners we have do separate feeds for international versus US, depending on rights. So it's a bit of a mixed bag there, but yes, the goal is to be as widely distributed as we can, find some great localization like driven content, whether it's like cricket for India or Australia or whatever, surfing in Australia, or just find ways that we can both appease local audiences, and also just people in America who are like, oh wow, I didn't know that that was a channel that existed. Like we got a funny message from someone recently through like the website that said like, how come you guys don't have a cricket channel? How dare you Americans, whatever. We're like, well, no, we have Willow Plus. Check it out. Here's the link. And he wrote back and was like, oh, okay, sorry. We're like, yeah, like we've got that. Like, and maybe we'll get cricket gold at some point. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like, we try to find those so that, if you can't find it other places, there's an option for you.
Yeah. Well, you just beat me to my next question, which was going to be about how you guys sort of curate per country. But it sounds like you guys are taking that into consideration for regional sports, and so that's really cool. Um,
Yeah, and there's some amazing sports out there. I think, I don't know, maybe not the perfect comparison, but it's like before Squid Game, did we really know that we loved South Korean content? Like we kind of knew it was cool, but after that we were like, holy crap, like they're amazing storytellers. And I think like with sports, it's like, do we watch Japanese baseball in America? No, like not at all. But it's because there's not really much availability for it. But like after the whole Shohei Ohtani thing, like I bet people would probably watch Japanese professional baseball now just to see if he goes back and plays in the off season there or whatever. It's just like kind of like the whole Olympics approach. If you've got these recognizable athletes that people love, but they're playing in the Olympics, they're gonna still watch basketball in the Olympics just as much as the NBA, because it's the same kind of sport. It's just skinned a little bit differently. So I don't know. I'm very interested to see if, when we do take on Korean or Japanese baseball, like does that pop in America because it's so underserved here, and maybe because it's just still great action, we just were never really exposed to it. Um, and those sports. have become much, much more competitive because they've just been around longer. The leagues have matured. They've now built farm leagues, and like baseball in Japan is massive. Um, like more people watch the World Series in Japan for the Dodgers than in America. You know what I
Wow,
mean?
I did not
So
know that. That's crazy.
yeah, and if you like, I go to the Dodger games all the time, and like there is a clear audience that comes to the games when Yamamoto is pitching and Shohei is on a run. And like, those are all Americans. They all live here. So you're telling me some of those people wouldn't watch Shohei play in Japan if they knew it was on TV in America? Of course they would. Like, I would watch that just to see what it was like, even if it's
Yeah,
only once or twice. But who knows? That's how you get people hooked. It's like, America didn't know that they loved women's college basketball as much as they did until Caitlin Clark came around. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is really fun to watch. And now it's like WNBA spillover that is incredible. So I think there are some of those things that we'll see evolve over time. That once they get highlighted and once someone breaks through, whether it's an athlete or just like an incredible game, um, that it'll just attract a larger audience. So hopefully we find a few of these, or we can manufacture a few of these. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think there's still a lot of globalization in sports to be had, especially in the U.S. because there's so many sports in the U.S. because of all the colleges and pro leagues and minor leagues that we just never really thought about exposing ourselves to. And now even like one step further because of social media, there's all these crazy niche sports that are now taking off because they're so viral that I think if they were on TV, people would watch them more. Um, but there just hasn't been that opportunity. So, like, I think an example of that, which Dana White has done, is he had UFC, then that whole like Power Slap League went crazy viral, and then he bought the Power Slap League, and now it's on TBS. You know what I mean? It's like that's insane. You know,
yeah,
from like a viral video to the founder of USC buying you to now being on a major broadcast network in America. That's insane. But I
yeah,
think we'll see more of that. I mean, cornhole's on ESPN.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's like there are some of those out there. So I think we'll see more of that. Um, and even like with the Olympics, the breakdancing thing, no one
hmm
cared about professional breakdancing, but it was so ridiculous that now I bet the numbers have gone up because just the awareness of it. Who cared about pole vault before that pole vaulter? No one. You know
yeah,
what I mean? From the Olympics, like there's just some things that like become so sticky that it just audiences will flock to it. So I don't know. I feel like you never really know what those breakthroughs are going to be until it kind of happens. But I don't know, having a nice portfolio of channels that hopefully you can find some of those quickly when that does happen, I think is going to be, a winning strategy for
yeah.
platforms.
Yeah, I went for Halloween as the viral Australian breakdancer Reagan, and I
Amazing.
got so many comments on it, even months after the Olympics. Everybody was still talking about it, and I still see news articles about her. So it is crazy just how much the virality of these things really impacts. Like you said, no one really mattered focused that much on breakdancing or any of this stuff beforehand, but now it's all anybody could talk about in the
That's
Olympics.
yeah. It just like broke the zeitgeist. It was just so silly and funny.
Yeah.
But I'm sure like a bunch of kids now are into breakdancing more, real breakdancing, maybe better breakdancing than that girl. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because of it,
Yeah.
and people love that. Dancing's so universal, globally. But yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess, to wrap up the whole conversation, I think looking ahead, like what do you foresee being your major goals for both active and free live sports? Like how do you measure success for both of your, ventures?
Um, I mean, with active, our success is kind of measured by the success of the channels and kind of our partners. So I think just making sure that our channels thrive and survive and are profitable in this, kind of somewhat saturated ecosystem, I think is a nice kind of like litmus test. Um, we have almost 20 channels now. I'd like us to grow and kind of double that channel amount. Our kind of short-term goal is to be, the premier partner that if you are a content owner, a celebrity, a brand, whatever it might be, and you want to get into fast, you come to us because we can do everything for you, soup to nuts, and do it faster and do it more efficient, ideally than anyone else. Um, as an independent company, that isn't really like tied to any other companies per se. We live in a somewhat safe space that we don't have any debt, we don't have any shareholders, we hopefully haven't made any enemies, and and if you want a great channel, we will build you a great channel. Like that should be the ultimate goal. As a business, like we want to make sure everybody's making money so that there's just some long-term viability. Um, on the free live sports front, we want to be the most successful, the largest, all sports driven platform that is free to watch. That whether you're in Japan or the US or the UK, you've got an awesome portfolio of channels you can choose from. And, in a perfect world, I don't know, Apple Plus buys us and plugs in our guide into, what they need because they don't have it, or Netflix or something like that. Um, but in short term, we want to be the coolest platform out there that people just go to when they think sports and live sports and free, hence the name Free Live Sports. Um, but but yeah, I think long-term viability and just kind of carving out our little spot in the industry, and banking on these continuing trends that streaming will take over more of linear broadcast, and at the end of the day, there can be 500 successful channels and everyone's kind of happy and the ecosystem works. I think that's the ultimate goal. Um, if anything, we really want to push the entire streaming television ecosystem in any way just to be successful. Because if the ecosystem can be successful, then all of us individually can be successful, and that's the main goal.
Yeah, that's great. We'll look forward to seeing how it all plays out and wish you the best of luck. Thank you, Geoff, so much for joining the podcast today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peyton, and yeah, look forward to the future.